Catherine always thought she had the perfect life. A beautiful home, a loving husband, Richard, who provided for her every need. But Richard's work took him away for long stretches, leaving Catherine in the sprawling silence of their estate. The days bled into one another, each one a mirror of the last, until Ben Saunders arrived. He was the new gardener, hired to tame the wild beauty of their overgrown landscape. At first, he was just a presence in the background, the distant hum of a lawnmower, the snipping of shears. But Catherine found herself watching him from the kitchen window. He moved with a quiet confidence, his hands shaping the world around him with a skill she found mesmerizing. One sweltering afternoon, she offered him a glass of cold water. He accepted with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, his gaze holding hers for just a moment longer than necessary. That was the beginning. Their conversation started small, simple chats about the weather and the stubbornness of weeds. But soon they grew into something more. Ben would share stories of his life, his travels, his dreams. He listened to her, truly listened, in a way she hadn't realized she was missing. He saw her not just as Richard's wife, but as Catherine. The garden, once a symbol of her quiet, lonely life, transformed into their shared world. He would point out a new bloom, explaining its delicate nature, and his fingers would brush against hers as he handed her a freshly picked rose. Each touch was a spark in the quiet stillness of her days. Catherine knew it was wrong. The guilt was a constant, low hum beneath the surface of their stolen moments. But the loneliness was a powerful tide, and Ben was the only one offering her a hand to hold. While Richard was closing deals in another city, Catherine was falling into a world she never imagined. Ben wasn't just tending to her garden anymore. He was tending to the neglected corners of her heart. She would receive a text from Richard about his long day, and moments later, Ben would be at her door, holding a wildflower he'd found just for her. The secrecy was a heavy cloak, but it was also thrilling. It was their secret, a world built for two, hidden in plain sight. She'd look at the family photos on the mantelpiece, Richard's smiling face a painful reminder of her betrayal. But then Ben would catch her eye from across the lawn, and the guilt would momentarily fade, replaced by a feeling she could only describe as being truly seen. The house, which had once felt so empty, was now filled with a tense, vibrant energy. Every creak of the floorboards, every ring of the phone sent a jolt of fear through her. She was living a double life, torn between the woman she was supposed to be and the woman she was becoming in the quiet afternoons with Ben. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply existed in her space, a warm, steady presence that she found herself leaning on more and more. He'd talk about the soil, about what it needs to thrive, sunlight, water, attention. And Catherine couldn't help but feel he was talking about her. She was a flower left too long in the shade, and Ben was the first sunshine she'd felt in years. The trust she had placed in him, the simple trust of an employer, had blossomed into something complex and dangerous. She had let the gardener into her home, and now he was taking root in her life in a way that threatened to tear everything apart. The affair was a whirlwind of hushed whispers in the greenhouse and fleeting glances over the rosebushes. The danger was part of the allure. The fear of being discovered was a constant, sharp edge that made every moment with Ben more intense. He had a way of making her feel like the only person in the world. He noticed the small things, a new haircut, the book she was reading. Richard, in his well-meaning but absent way, had stopped noticing those things long ago. He loved her, she knew, but his love felt like a comfortable, well-worn sweater. Ben's affection was a wildfire. It was unpredictable and all-consuming. Catherine found herself rearranging her schedule, creating excuses to be home when Ben was there, her life revolving around these stolen hours. One afternoon they were in the kitchen. Rain was streaking down the windows, trapping them inside. The air was thick with unspoken words. Ben was fixing a leaking faucet, his shirt damp, clinging to his back. He turned, and the space between them vanished. The sound of the rain, the ticking of the clock, it all faded away. It was a moment of absolute surrender. Catherine was no longer just a lonely wife. She was a woman consumed by a desire she had long forgotten she was capable of feeling. The betrayal was complete, a silent bomb detonated in the heart of her marriage. She knew, even in that moment, that there was no going back. The foundation of her life, the vows she had made, had been fractured. When Richard came home, the house felt different. The air was heavy with her secrets. She tried to be the wife he remembered, to slip back into her old life as if nothing had changed. But the guilt was a phantom that followed her from room to room. Every time she looked at Richard, she saw Ben's face. Every kind word from her husband felt like a twist of the knife. He was so oblivious, so trusting. He'd comment on how beautiful the garden looked, praising the work of the man who was dismantling their life from the outside in. Catherine would just smile, a hollow, fragile expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. The web of lies grew more tangled with each passing day. She was an actress in her own home, playing the part of a faithful wife while her heart belonged to another. The end came, as it always does, without warning. Richard came home early one day, a surprise trip to make up for his time away. He walked through the garden, looking for Catherine, wanting to see the delight on her face. And he found her. He found her with Ben, not in a compromising position, but in a moment of quiet intimacy that was somehow more damning. They were sitting on a bench, her head resting on his shoulder, a look of peaceful contentment on her face that he hadn't seen in years. The betrayal wasn't just in the physical act. It was in that moment of emotional surrender. The trust, the very bedrock of their marriage, crumbled into dust. The beautiful garden, once her sanctuary, had become the scene of her downfall. There were no shouts, no accusations, just a profound, shattering silence. In that silence, Catherine finally understood the true cost of her lonely afternoons. She had sought a temporary escape from her loneliness, but in doing so, she had created a void far bigger and more permanent than the one she was trying to fill. The flowers in her perfect garden would continue to bloom, but for Catherine, winter had arrived.